headline to today's Shakedown is an interview with Sir Jackie Stewart. And even you young viewers better know who the hell he is. F1 legend, three-time world champion, 27 wins in 99 Grand Prix. A versatile racer who drove beyond F1, sports cars at Le Mans and around the globe. The Indy 500 was 8 laps away from winning the thing. Drove Can-Am and much more. Now JYS was in NYC on a media tour promoting the reissue of a Roman Polanski docudrama film called Weekend of a Champion. Roman filming Jackie Stewart at the 1971 Monaco Grand Prix and then interviewing him 40 years later. My interview did not take that long. Also today, in the spirit of Jackie and Roman's Weekend of a Champion, let's discuss auto racing films and what makes a good one. Hey, I got to interview Jackie Stewart, but as I stood there, I was not in awe. It was no big deal. Let me explain. See, in my youth, I admired guys like Stewart because in the midst of everything going on around them, they put all emotion aside, put their head down, and just focused on the job. Do the job. Get it done. Be the best you can be. Stewart was that guy. Now, as an Italian American, I know about emotion. Just ask me a question about the gymnastics in my professional life, and the rant starts to sound like a Joe Pesci scene in every Scorsese movie. But as a racer, I knew I needed to not be like that in the car, but be like Jackie Stewart, in control, unfazed. So kind of in his honor, that's what happened when I interviewed this racing god. Head down, do the job, show some skills, and hopefully Jackie respected that, because in my way, using his way, I was doing my best to be respectful to Sir Jackie Stewart. World champion Jackie Stewart and the Roman Polanski film Weekend of a Champion. The film opens in New York City on November 22nd at the IFC Center and Lincoln Center theaters. A nationwide release follows, and Weekend of a Champion will also be on Netflix. Here are a few scenes.
Do you think this is the safest place to watch them?
I tell you, you'd be standing here yesterday to wet yourself if I had come up here, because this is where I stopped.
That's where you stop?
Yeah.
Right here?
Right there. I
That's
spun off
good.
and came around here.
I know.
See, that guy's got the wrong line altogether. Totally wrong. He's coming up too far to the right. And he was braking too early. And changing down too early. Watch the quick ones. They don't change down until they go past that zebra crossing there. So therefore, braking is very important. If the balance of the brakes, you know, if that's not right, it really screws you up. That's to say, the balance from the front to the rear. You've got to have the front wheels braking just beginning to lock to stop before the rear wheels do that, because these are the only ones you can see.
Yeah.
You know, if the rear wheels lock, well then, of course, as soon as you get to the corner, you immediately start sliding round. Whereas when the front brakes do that, at least you can see the puffs of smoke coming off them.
Under the wheel.
Yeah. Nearly right. He's quick. I was having trouble with my hand, blisters in my hand, and we thought by changing the shape to this, in fact, we'd eliminate the blisters. But if we go in it that way, you're changing gear like that normally, but you know, up and down like that. But when, in fact, you have to go from 4th to 5th, you do it like that.
Like this, yeah.
You know, so you just change round whatever way you want. I mean, there's enough room. There's a little bubble goes over here in the body to look after that. Hey? Do you want to hear about it? I get a blister there, and I get blisters here.
Well, this is
No, there.
No, well, you obviously hold it differently from me, don't you?
I probably do. I don't know what's happening.
Well, I must say, it's a very fast time, Jackie. Very impressed I was. Very quick.
Yeah, but what about today?
What about today?
I was driving my ass off, and I couldn't do any better than 33.3, yeah.
Yeah, do you find that...
I couldn't drive any faster.
find that extraordinary?
No, but I mean, 2.5 seconds is a long way.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit shorter than I am behind you in the dry anyway.
Well,
I
then.
mean, I reckon that was, a pretty good time. I don't know where I'm going to see that time from, but you must be sure I should be trying, but it's not going to interest you too much, as I'm so far back.
Oh, listen to that.
What caught my attention with this film was its honesty. As cool as the 1971 Monaco F1 footage was, better than the film Grand Prix in my opinion because it was real stuff, real cars, real guys, and not a fictional story. What got Weekend to draw me in was when Jackie and Roman did their interview, back in Monaco, but 40 years later. Stewart was remarkable, letting us all inside the head of a racer and a champion. His honesty about self-doubt was remarkable and perversely comforting. Holy shit, I'm not the only one in the world that looks in the mirror and thinks, I suck, this will all be over by Tuesday when they catch on to my inadequacies. And I'll just work harder, faster, as best I can. Driven by fear of failure, works every time. Then Jackie spoke about his dyslexia, basically a difficulty with word recognition and reading comprehension. It all can impede the speed of learning. It drove Jackie from school to his family's auto repair garage, where a customer helped him find his way into his first race cars. Dyslexia forces one to be more creative, sorting through info, processing info. But there's actually a growing body of evidence to suggest an advantage. Some creative and successful dyslexics, John Lennon, Albert Einstein, Steven Spielberg, Ali, Bill Hewitt of Hewlett-Packard, Henry friggin' Ford, and Jackie Stewart, and a lot more. There's a list in the links below and a bit on dyslexia itself. And seems dyslexia influences many vital mental functions, including three-dimensional spatial reasoning, the perception of the interrelationships around similarities, differences, and the implications of information, the ability to remember experiences and to understand from those specifics, and the ability to identify and take advantage of subtle patterns in the complex and constantly shifting systems. Hey, wait a minute, I want to be dyslexic. Go replay that list and see the connection to race car driving. Now, Weekend of a Champion let the viewer inside the humanity of this guy, this racer, this Jackie Stewart icon. And then there was the whole safety issue in racing back then. The film Rush and this new F1 film 1 pile onto that danger storyline. So one can only assume, since Jackie was at the forefront of the safety revolution, that that fact had some bearing on the rationale to recut and re-release this 1972 film, Weekend of a Champion, here again in 2013. All in all, Weekend of a Champion, it's an interesting film to watch, and it makes one think about, and me ask you, what makes for a great racing movie? Is it the cars, the stars, the characters, the story? And do non-racing fans even care about racing movies? Rush, that movie, has earned $90 million in global ticket sales, but only $27 million of that in the US. Now, Jackie and Roman liked the film, and the critics did too, but Bad Grandpa made $78 million in the US, more than the box office for Rush. Talladega Nights grossed $47 million just to open, and over $163 million global in total. So maybe distracting the public from the fact that the film is about racing makes for a more successful racing film? I don't know. Back to the question, what makes a great racing film? You think about it and comment, please. And to help you, here's my Twitter-inspired review of each of these famous racing movies. Grand Prix, cinematography. Le Mans, the sights, the sounds. Days of Thunder, well, like Cole Trickle, I won't make a fool of you. He did. Rush, I didn't see it, but hey, I've been busy, and I know how it ends. Lauda hits the iceberg, the ship sinks with James Hunt's wife, right? Winning, Newman, Paul Newman. Senna, the drama. That Talladega Nights movie, the most accurate racing film ever, trust me. Heart Like a Wheel was Bonnie Bedelia playing Shirley Muldowney, the drag racer, and it was all about personal fight. Bobby Deerfield, who, what? Al Pacino in an Alpha? Fast and Furious, Diesel, duh. Speed Racer, trust me, it's the future of racing. And Weekend of a Champion, it was inside the racer's mind. Okay, time for the Jackie Stewart interview. Thanks for watching, and go see Weekend of a Champion. Opening in New York, November 22nd, nationwide release, and on Netflix. And next week, for me, from the LA Auto Show, it's time to debrief the news from the Tudor United Sports Car tests that are happening starting this weekend, and the COTA US Grand Prix happening without Kimi. See ya. Jackie Stewart, there are three things that resonate in my mind. For all your accomplishments, there are three topics that come to bear. One of them obviously has to do with safety, and we'll discuss that. you were one of the first people to embrace the commercialism of racing. Yeah. But I'm going to start with the first one. You've put a lot of American motorsport broadcasters out of business because you've made it seem only appropriate for a UK accent to narrate racing.
Well, Roone Arledge, who was an icon of television, was the president of ABC News and Sport. Took me on in 1971, the year that Roman Polanski made the movie on me. And he took me on. I was one of the very early colour commentators, as he called them, and that was the name that came thereafter, which meant I was doing sometimes up to 25 shows a year, not just in motor racing, but the Winter Olympics, the Summer Olympics, bobsleigh championships, etc. And then, I don't know, the world changed, and that's why I think I like America so much, because I had to come here so much. Both my sons were educated in America, and somehow or other life went in that direction.
The film obviously harkens back to that era, that you were such a superstar. Did you feel there was a difference between the American sense of racing at the time and European?
A huge difference. We were attracted as Europeans or global racing drivers to the Indianapolis 500. Ironically, not to stock car racing like Daytona 500. Somehow or other, the open wheel racing, we were running rear engine cars when America was still running front engine cars. So when the odd rear engine car came to America, suddenly we thought the big money was in America. So we all went to Indianapolis. I nearly won the race. I was running the race. I think I was leading it by nearly 2 laps, with only 8 laps to go.
Yes.
Oh, the Scottish economy hasn't recovered. But America attracted me, and then later I did sports car racing and Can-Am racing in the States. So America's been a big part of my life. Both my sons were educated in America, and Helen and I have had homes in America. So television at that time, there is no doubt that ABC's Wide World of Sports was the #1 sports network in the world. And I was lucky enough to be taken on and working with people like Jim McKay and Al Michaels and Keith Jackson, etc.
You were one of the people back then where drivers used to cross over, and you drove some fantastic cars, from the Ford Mark II, the Rover BRM at Le Mans, for Lola and Can-Am, for Chaparral and Can-Am,
yes, yeah.
McLaren and Can-Am.
Oh, you're doing pretty well. You've
Sure,
got a
not
good
stupid.
memory.
But was there a scenario back then, besides the driving and learning something from everything, was there a scenario where people were afraid to trade secrets because you've been in so many cars?
I don't think so. I think that's one of the reasons I was taken on, because I had a wide experience, and hopefully from experience you gain knowledge and sometimes wisdom. So when I was driving a lot of cars from different arenas, people thought, well, maybe he can help us on this one and see how does he like it, and does he think it's better or worse. So I got a lot of good invitations to come from all over the world. And motor racing is a global sport, and now even more global than it was because of television. It's the biggest television sport in the world. It's even bigger than the Olympics and the Soccer World Cup, because they're only every 4 years. So therefore, the whole world's motorized also. Everybody who drives a car can relate to motorsport in some way. So television, I think, has made motorsport, and certainly made Formula One, Grand Prix racing, which has not really yet been taken on in the heart of the Americans at all.
The second topic that I feel you led the way was your embrace of commercializing of motorsport. You seemed to understand what was going on, not the business side of it, but just when you were a driver. Talk to me about that as you see it transition from the spirit you had back when you raced to what seems to be predominantly more commercial, more show. Have we lost something?
I don't think so. I think that the sport is better today than it ever was. I'm not one of these people who thinks, well, the good old days were better. They were many times the bad old days. So commercialism relit motorsport, brought it into the modern era. Commercially, motorsport was being used. You know, the Ford Motor Company, I've been with Ford for 40 years. I was under contract to the company. I won all 3 of my world championships with a Ford engine. I wouldn't have been able to do that with anybody else. Ford were the people at that time. But I was with Goodyear. I was the first person to spray champagne, for example, in Formula One. Dan Gurney did it at Le Mans, and I did it in Formula One. Now I'm on the board of Moet Hennessy because I've been under contract to them for 44 years. Rolex I've been with for 45 years. So the commercial side has had an immense amount to do with my current life, which is that of the business world, as well as still having a keen interest in motorsport. But when the big names came in, I think the first one that came in was Yardley, and cosmetics. And then there came the Gold Leaf Team Lotus, which was the British American Tobacco Company, really. And then it became the John Player Special from the same parent company. Then Marlboro arrived, Philip Morris, a giant. And along with that, all of the others came, the Hewlett-Packards, the Texacos, the Lear corporations who make vehicle interiors that people don't know about, but they're the biggest in the world here in America, the biggest in the world. So I saw the potential of the commercial element, to make money, and maybe more importantly, the quality of some of the people. Ford had a man called Walter Hayes, a tremendous PR man, maybe the best in the world. And, Henry Ford II himself, I knew very well, and his son Edsel, is still one of my best friends. Whether it was them or whether it was the chairman of Goodyear, or whether it was any of the other big multinationals that I was representing, you learn so much from people of that skill level that I saw the long-term potential of being a sports person with good commercial savvy, if you like.
Well, I'm going to say 2 things, not to pander to Sir Jackie Stewart, but as visionary as they were, I think you led their thinking to realize the potential of what was in motorsport and how to approach it. And number 2, correct me if I'm wrong, the Red Bulls of the world that have come into motorsport came through Stewart F1, wasn't it? Originally Stewart F1 transitioning?
Well, the current Red Bull Formula One team is in the Stewart Grand Prix factory. We created it. It was a greenfield site. We started it. We built it up. I had Stewart Grand Prix. We won a Grand Prix within 36 months. We were 2 podiums, well, more than 2 podiums, many podiums. We had a pole position and so forth. We had a successful Formula One team, my son Paul and I, and then we sold it to Ford. That has now since gone from Ford to Red Bull, and they are now the multiple world champions. But I think the commercial side was an important element of my life, and I wouldn't be here today, frankly. The Roman Polanski film that was made of me, Weekend of a Champion, is probably more prevalent today than it was when it first came out. And it was never really exposed when it first came out. Roman did it as a bit of a hobby, in a sense. And now it may be more interesting for people to see how things were back then to where we are today in motorsport. But Formula One, commercially, it's the biggest sport in the world, because it doesn't matter how many full pages you can get in the New York Times or the LA Times. It doesn't matter how many commercials you can take up in television. For bang for the buck, it still is the biggest. Formula One gives global exposure in a way, as long as it's a global company, in a way that nothing else can. So it's developed into a huge machine.
The third item is obviously safety and everything you've done. And the film shows a snapshot of racing at that time, but obviously deals with the safety part. I had just heard an interview with 2 other drivers, one historical, one more current. And they talked about fear and how to manage that, and if you can't manage the fear, get out of the car. But it felt like, to me, we were almost going back in time. The question that wasn't answered, and I'm asking you, is what is the driver's responsibility to creating safety in motorsport? I mean, that's clearly what you decided was what needed to be done.
Well, nobody else was doing it. The governing body at that time were not doing it, whereas the governing body today are doing a huge amount and have done. It was very raw. It was very dangerous. there was a 2 out of 3 chance you were going to die if you lasted a 5-year period. A 1 out of 3 you were going to live. Ridiculous. And all of my friends, most all of them, have died. My racing car friends, my driver friends. We counted 57 close friends, not close, but enough that we travelled together, ate together, holidayed together and raced together. Helen and I in front of the fire one night counted that number, 57 people. So the sport today, however, and what I started and probably what I'm most proud of in my motor racing career was changing that safety element. We've now, as we do this interview, it will be 19 years, 7 months, and 3 days since we lost the life of a Grand Prix driver. Now, they're, fractions of inches apart at over 200 miles an hour sometimes. Human error, mechanical failure, and yet they're still surviving even horrendous accidents because of the technology, the safety factors that we've built in, the medical facilities that are immediately available, etc. So that side of it, I've come through and lived through, and fortunately I'm here to tell the tale. And actually, never having taken a drop of my body, of blood out of my body. Never spilt blood driving a racing car. By the way, there's some English people who would suggest there's no blood to be drawn from a Scot. But nevertheless, it's a fact. And there we are. I mean, that's how big the change is.
So there are 2 questions to that part. Obviously, your style has been one of a thinking driver. How much of your ability to protect yourself in the car came from you managing this, and how much was good fortune, or were you leading so much you had nothing to hit?
Well, you got to say you need luck. Okay. You can't remove the risk of accident. You can manage it, and you can build around the risk by minimizing the downside risks, removing the unnecessary hazards. And I was always very conscious about that. I wore normal underwear plus 2 layers of thermal underwear before fireproof driving suits. The modern driver doesn't need to do that because there's been no fires, if you like. But I probably would still wear that if I were racing today in case there was a fire. So you can't take anything for granted just because there hasn't been a fire. If there were to be a fire, isn't it better to be prepared for that? So preventive medicine is much better than corrective medicine. It's less expensive and it's less painful. So my philosophy still in life today, I'm still very conscious of removing downside risks. And that's just part of me. Because I came through the most volatile period of motorsport, the greatest period of loss of life. And when you're up close and personal to that amount of grief, meeting fathers and mothers at funerals and memorial services or in their homes, their wives, their girlfriends, their brothers, their sisters, it's you say to yourself, what are you going to do about it? You've got to act. There's no good of standing back and saying it won't happen to me.
F1 has stepped it up, but we've still lost drivers, even recently. Without casting any aspersions, just as your eyes on it, is there a focus of where safety can be taken to the next step?
You can never say that you've got it done. I mean, accidents will always happen and freak accidents sometimes occur. However, you've got to remove the downside risk and you've got to live with that constantly. And you've got to introduce change. You can't say, well, there's never been an accident over there. If that accident happens and you haven't prepared for it, then it could be a fatality. So therefore, I think it never stops. I don't think because there hasn't been a crash in that corner means that there shouldn't be something done with that corner in case there is an accident. Of course, it's expensive, and sometimes that's what stops people from doing things they should do. But there's always a way to catch the monkey. There's always a way to get round the problem. That's the secret of life. You know, you face problems. Who was it? Lenin, who said, there are no problems, there are only solutions. And that's a fact. So don't take anything for granted.
Last question. Your driving style has always been one of smooth. That worked for that technology. In current technology, smooth still makes you quicker?
Exactly.